Well, this morning we are talking about the most important question. And in light of what we gathered to celebrate last week, Easter, that Jesus is alive, that he is risen. He is risen. Indeed. Alleluia. It's the most important question. And we know that life is full of questions. Some are simple, like what should I eat for dinner, or what should I watch on TV, or at least they're supposed to be simple. Some questions are serious, like where is my phone? Or what am I supposed to be doing with my life? And then there's the urgent questions of like, should I be worried that my kids are too quiet in the room next door? Or the deeply theological question of like, if God can move mountains, will he help me find a front row parking spot at Costco this week? Now, all kidding aside, though, questions are important. And today we're not talking about any of those questions, but we're talking about the most important question, and that is, who is Jesus? And who is Jesus in light of this reality that the tomb was empty and that he is alive and with us everywhere that we go? A.W. Tozer, a famous theologian, puts it this way: what comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. And this is true because the way that we see Jesus is going to shape the way that we respond to Jesus. And I'm reminded of a story that took place in Spain a little over a decade ago. There was this sweet old lady who decided that it was time to DIY touch up this famous one-of-a-kind masterpiece, a picture of Jesus. It's a fresco. I don't really know what that means, but I know that it's important. But with that, she took it upon herself to do some touch-ups to this painting because she wanted it to bring it back to life. And so she did. And when the people came back and they started to check in on her and see how she was doing, this masterpiece was no longer recognizable. Instead of this picture of Jesus, we get this picture that kind of looks like a fuzzy potato with a beard. It's distorted. It's unrecognizable in many ways. And I tell us this story because in the same way that if we aren't careful, that our own picture of Jesus can become faded, distorted, or even incomplete. And that's why today and every Sunday that we gather to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, because it changes everything. And so for us, we're going to pick up the resurrection story from last week. Last week we noticed, or we saw, that the tomb was empty. Jesus makes this magnificent appearance to Mary Magdalene, who goes and tells the disciples. Later in the day, Jesus appears to his disciples in the upper room, or in the room where they were kind of hiding from people. But not every heart was convinced, because there was one disciple who was not with the other disciples, and his name is Thomas. And so we're picking up in John chapter 20, beginning in verse 24. Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, which is a way to say that he was likely a twin, by the way, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But Thomas said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." Now Thomas, his nickname is what? Doubting Thomas. And it's a little bit misconstrued because, yes, he's skeptical of Jesus' resurrection. And I mean, if you weren't in there to see him in person, wouldn't you have a few questions too, probably? Maybe. And so for Thomas, yes, he's known as Doubting Thomas, but I think a better way to think about Thomas was not so much that he was rebellious, but he was honest. He was a loyal but curious disciple. I mean, a few chapters earlier, he was ready to die with Jesus. He asked honest questions because he had this search or this desire to have truth and understanding. And so for Thomas, he was a little bit skeptical, and yes, and you could say he doubted, but he shouldn't be necessarily marked by doubt for his entire discipleship career. But I wonder if any of us can relate to Thomas. For some of us, do we have questions? Do we have doubts or skepticism every once in a while, especially in life when it doesn't quite make sense? When we wonder, does God really care about me? Does God really love me? Right, there are these moments in our lives that can cause us to kind of put ourselves in the same shoes as Thomas. But a week later, Jesus shows up. Jesus, with his disciples, were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." Now here the disciples are again on a Sunday. They're gathering together in this house. And Jesus shows up in the middle of their hiding, in the middle of them being behind locked doors. It's this picture of Jesus who shows up even in our fear, even in our doubting, even in our skepticism. He shows up behind the locked doors and he brings us his peace. And so for us, maybe you feel like you're behind locked doors of fear, of regret, of shame, of guilt or remorse or even grief. But the risen Jesus, he meets us where we are. He steps into the spaces of our locked doors and he brings us peace. And so here's Jesus now standing with Thomas. And he says, "Thomas, put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out and put your hand into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Can you imagine what Thomas is experiencing here in this moment? Jesus stepping into this space, stepping into this questions of Thomas, and he's meeting him where he's at. He's meeting him in his doubts. And for us, it's this reminder that Jesus does two things for us. That he hears our doubts, even though he's not physically there, and he meets us not with condemnation, but with mercy. Jesus doesn't scold Thomas and say, "How could you not believe?" He knows our questions, he knows our wounds, he knows our hesitations, and he says, "I'm coming into them with peace. Meet me here, and I will provide the peace that you need." And so Thomas, in this moment, sees Jesus in the flesh. It's this beautiful moment where Thomas is starting to make sense of everything. And Jesus tells him, "Stop your unbelief and believe." But what Jesus is really saying, don't live in unbelief, be believing. Not about this one thing, but Jesus is inviting Thomas and he invites us into this new life of faith, a life that is marked by the risen Jesus who comes and changes everything. It's a life that is marked by Jesus being the victorious King, the risen Lord over sin, death, and the power of the devil, the God who is with us. See, because Thomas believed Jesus as teacher. He believed Jesus even as miracle worker. He even saw Jesus crucified. And yet here he is being invited into this next level of faith, this faith that is marked by Jesus being alive. And so we have one of the most clear and powerful confessions in all of New Testament, right here when Thomas realizes that he is standing in front of the resurrected Christ. He says, "My Lord and my God." My Lord and my God. Not the Lord and the God, but my Lord and my God. It's his personal confession that flows from the heart, that flows from what he believes, not just what he sees or knows. It's this confession that says, Jesus, you are the Lord, Kyrios. It's the New Testament Greek word for Yahweh, the personal name of God. It's this reminder that God is over all things, but then he's also responsible for all things, so we can trust him with that. He is the one who is worthy of worship and obedience. And then theos, God, his divine essence. He is the God, the creator of the universe, the one who is above all things, and nothing compares to him. This is who Thomas sees as Jesus. Not just a messenger or miracle worker. He is the creator, the one who was there in the beginning. This is the highest Christological confession or statement about Jesus and his divinity in all of John's gospel. In many ways, it's the climactic moment of John's gospel. The reason that the first 20 chapters are there is to get John's readers, you and I, to make this confession with Thomas. Jesus, you are my Lord and my God. It's what everything is pointing to. And it's this moment where things come full circle because Thomas recognizes the truth, that Jesus is, yes, he is God. And it's this full circle moment from the gospel that I read just a moment ago, where Jesus is making this declaration, where he's telling them to believe not just in God, but in me, because I am God. And he's reminding them and showing them of what's to come on the other side of faith. And on the other side of the cross and the empty tomb, and that is life with God forever. It's this declaration where Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. It's the resurrection that cements this reality that Jesus is exactly who he claimed to be, that he is Lord, that he is God, and that he is our only hope. Because Jesus is the way. I mean, have you ever been lost? Not in a spiritual sense, but actually lost. Maybe in the days before GPS on your phone telling you how to reroute. So I remember a time when I was much younger, my mom and I were vacationing in St. Louis, a town we'd never been to, a town that is relatively easy to get lost in, I think, because we did. And so for us, we made a couple wrong turns, and we didn't know where we were going until we realized that we were where we weren't supposed to be. We were in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods, lost, confused, and everyone's just kind of from their porches looking at us like, what are these people doing in here? But thankfully, after a few other right turns, we eventually made it to our destination. But it's this reminder that sometimes we get disoriented. Sometimes we struggle or we feel stuck or we're confused and we don't know which way to go. And yet it's Jesus who is the way, who provides us with direction and purpose, and he is ultimately the one who leads us home. Jesus on the cross, what appeared to be a dead end, paved the way for you and I to be restored, to be reconciled with God. And he removed all of the barriers that stood between us and God caused by sin. He became the bridge, the way for us, lost children, to find their way home to the loving arms of their Father. And because Jesus is still the risen King, and he's the one who still leads doubters and sinners and the lost home, we get to trust him and know that as we give our life to him, as we seek him, that he will ultimately make our paths straight. It's Proverbs 3 that Larry read just a moment ago. All right, so we can trust him because he is the one who ultimately is leading us home. And then Jesus is the truth. And in a world that is full of opinions and misinformation and your truth versus my truth, the resurrection cements this reality that his word is true. And that everything that he said was right. Right? When Jesus said the Son of Man must suffer and rise again, he wasn't guessing. The resurrection is God's public endorsement of every claim that Jesus made. Everything that we believe, everything that we are here to gain, hinges on the resurrection. And today, we are reminded that he is the truth that gives our life meaning and purpose. He is the one that shows us how it is that we live our lives, what we trust in, and the source of our strength and our hope in a world that oftentimes feels unstable. It's because of the resurrection and because it proves that every word Jesus spoke is true, and that we can take his word and look to it for guidance, for wisdom, and understanding. And finally, Jesus is the life. Right? When Jesus overcame death for us, it was the beginning of a whole new life that we get to experience. A life that death can't touch. A life that sin can't destroy. A life that fear can't suffocate. Because Jesus says in John 10 that I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly. And that's what Jesus offers us through the cross and through the empty tomb. A life both that we get to look forward to forever with him in eternity, but a life here today that is marked by his Spirit, his joy, his peace, his strength. Right? See, Easter Sunday, Resurrection Sunday reminds us that he delivered the gifts that he set out to deliver, that he fulfilled God's purposes for restoring us back into a relationship. See, the resurrection proves that Jesus gives life, the life that our hearts were made for, a life that is marked by a relationship with the Father. He is the way, he is the truth, and he is the life. And if there's one thing to take away today, it's this, that the resurrection doesn't just prove who Jesus is, it invites you to trust him with your whole life. Because he is the way that leads you home. He is the truth that you can trust when everything else feels shaky. He is the life that you were created for, a life forever, a life that is marked by his joy and his freedom. That is who Christ is. And so for us, here's how we live this out. We live this out by following the way, that we look to Jesus for the answers. God, where would you have me go? And then we trust that he is leading the way, that he is making the path straight for us. We follow his promptings in his way. We trust in the truth. Our Bible doesn't just become a dust collector on our tables, but rather it's the source in which we anchor our lives in. We spend time getting to know him and understanding him and understanding what truth is. And as we dive into his word and we trust his truth, we're reminded of what is real. And what is real is very different oftentimes than what the world tries to tell us that is real. And so we anchor ourselves in his word. And then finally, we rest in the life. When fear, anxiety, pressure begins to creep in, we remind ourselves that it's not about how well I do or how well life is going, but it's about what Christ has done for me. It's built on the unshakable joy, the unshakable victory of his resurrection, in which he overcame sin, death, and the power of the devil for you and I. It's a life that is marked by the hope that we have in Christ. And so for us, we walk with him, we listen to him, and we rest in him. And today, Jesus asks the same question. It's a question that we wrestle with, and sometimes we get it right, and sometimes maybe we don't. But who is Jesus to you? Because he's more than a teacher. He's more than a good example or religious leader. He is the Christ. He is the Son of the living God. He is the Lord, your Lord, the one who is over all things, the one who is present in your suffering, the one who is responsible for your life day in and day out, the one who daily and richly provides for you. He is the God. He is your God, the one who is creator, the one who is sustainer, the one whose love knows no ends because of how deep his love is for you. And so today, may the Spirit lead each of us with Thomas, with the apostles, with the church throughout the generations, to confess that Jesus is my Lord and my God, and that we would turn to him, that we would look to him, that we would walk with him and rest in him each and every day, knowing that he is my Lord, worthy of my obedience and my praise, that he is working all things together in my life, and that he is my God, the one who has no match on earth, the one who is worthy of it all. Jesus is my Lord and my God. That is the confession that we get to make each and every day, and then walk in that, rest in that. And so now may God's peace and strength be with you today and always. Amen.